Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining for our webinar, Support Federal Software Development Contracts with End-to-End Traceability. My name is Lauren Rollins, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for this webinar. Before I introduce you to our presenters, let me cover a couple of housekeeping details. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll provide you all with a link to the recording tomorrow. As you may have noticed, all attendees are on mute to avoid background noise, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We'll have time at the end for Q&A, but if you have any questions or comments as we go, please type them in the GoToWebinar control panel in the questions box. We'll be monitoring the questions and we'll get them organized for Q&A. Our presenters for today are Laura Horner and Maury Cupit. Laura is the Regional Sales Manager for the Federal and Mid-Atlantic Territories at Tasktop. Her past experience includes working for a product development partner, 3Pillar Global, as well as an ALM tool provider, CA Technologies, which has provided a strong knowledge base for helping organizations with their agile, lean, and DevOps transformations. Maury is the Senior Director of Pre-Sales at Tasktop. He has over 15 years of experience working with production application development, triage, and performance. Before that, Maury gained experience with great companies like Netscape, Avantgo, and Wiley, and today he continues to improve software development processes for clients across the globe. Maury and Laura, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren. This is Laura. Thank you guys all for joining us this afternoon. What we're going to do is spend a little bit of time just introducing the Tasktop solution, what the current state looks like, the problem that we aim to solve, and how that relates to the current state today. As we know, today, software is the most important commodity in the modern economy. It drives everything that we do. Imagine our life without software. There'd be very little that would get done. We are all living in an information type of an age where companies are driven by information. That means agencies are also driven by software. So what does that mean for the current state? We know that software delivery processes are manual, they're expensive, and in need of constant optimization. We understand that system integrators, government employees, and all team members that are working to support the public sector are trying hard and working hard at optimizing software delivery and development processes. But the challenge is that as software becomes more integral to our daily lives, we want software faster, better, quicker, which leads to siloed teams, data confusion, manual and duplicate data entry. We're all looking to work in our best-of-breed tools, but we all have to communicate across these silos. And because we have to communicate across these silos, there's a lot of manual and duplicate data entry, and this can lead to a difficult, costly invalidation and verification process. So where does Tasktop fit into the picture? Ultimately, at Tasktop, we like to think of ourselves as a glue that automates and connects the software delivery process. We provide traceability across the lifecycle, connecting the silos, eliminating the manual processes and duplicate entry that we're commonly used to in software development. And this allows for greater and enhanced communication amongst the teams and allows for greater visibility across programs. One thing I'd like to point out is greater visibility across the program. This can span not only amongst the team that you currently work, but can also span government to system integrator to system integrator, team to team, across all aspects of the public sector. We're not limited to just the team that you're working on. So the way that we look at the Tasktop solution, ultimately our goal is to connect the application lifecycle. At Tasktop, we like to think of our solution and break it up into 3 different segments. Before I get into those segments, I'd like to introduce 2 concepts or 2 key phrases that you may hear Maury and I use. That is ALM, Application Lifecycle Management, and SDLC, Software Development Lifecycle. These are 2 common phrases that we use in our vernacular on a daily basis, and know that you guys may commonly use something similar, but ultimately I just wanted to level set the audience that the software development lifecycle and ALM is essentially the process in which we're developing software. Going back to the connected application lifecycle, looking at the solution set from the synchronization, integration, and aggregation perspective, ultimately from a synchronization perspective, this is the core of Tasktop. This is where we're providing a bidirectional flow of information across silo to silo, tool to tool, so that users are able to stay in their best of breed solution and work more productively and collaborate better. This is ultimately where we're initiating traceability across the lifecycle and connecting the software delivery and development process. Going to the next area of integration. You may think integration and synchronization, somewhat synonymous words, but at Tasktop we think of them as slightly different. When we look at integration, we're looking at integrating event-based data for enhanced visibility into the software development and delivery process. Common examples of tools where you may be looking to integrate event-based data are through continuous integration and continuous delivery. These are types of integration solutions that are going to integrate event-based driven data into either a database or into another supported tool that we're synchronizing with. And ultimately, this capability allows us to truly connect users and organizations and agencies into more of a DevOps transformation, agile transformation. The third area that we like to focus on is around aggregation. Since we provided the capability to synchronize data across the lifecycle as well as integrate event-driven data into our tool sets or into a database, we're also able to aggregate that data and capture it, lifecycle data, in near real time so that we can provide traceability and analytics across the program. This aggregated data is going to be useful for system integrators, for government employees to provide verification and validation information, and also to provide information on how software is being developed and delivered within the program. This is going to help the agency and the system integrator, the team, understand where bottlenecks are in the software development and delivery process so that steps can be made to produce software better and faster. Ultimately, when we look at the Tasktop solution, it really boils down to traceability, and traceability at the core, from tracing it from requirement through test and to deployment. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Maury Cupid for a moment so he can provide a technical perspective on this slide and how it relates to the software development process.
Thanks, Laura. This is a slide that Laura and I have been introducing to our customers for a little bit now. We actually got it from another one of our customers and really starting to enhance it. It really ties in this need for traceability, whether that traceability is for validation or for verification. If I've got governance components that I need to focus on, that traceability and that synchronization, integration, aggregation that Laura talked about is the centerpiece of tying all these steps in the application lifecycle together. The interesting thing is really the core product that we have, synchronization, is the start and almost the finish of this process, because it allows for these integrated tool sets to share data across the lifecycle so that you can start to do your validation and verification and your traceability across. So where our customers were having a hard time with trying to connect to each of these systems through some manual process, pull the data out, store that in a spreadsheet or a Word document for validation, we're focused on automating the data that goes between those silos and automating the access to that data so that you're not missing any part of that process. And as a leading global bank says, the traceability relationships, they're the prerequisite for all of this. So to get increased automation, to get better communication, better flow, it all starts with this ability to understand the relationships between the steps in the application lifecycle and how do I get data in and out and across the application lifecycle.
Thank you, Maury. What you're looking at now is our version of what we like to provide for many of our customers, and what we call it is a software lifecycle architecture drawing. Ultimately, we provide these software lifecycle architecture drawings for all of our customers to help visualize the workflow and how they see the connected application lifecycle being built out across the software development lifecycle. This is just merely an example and a representation, and is actually a snapshot of what Maury is going to be able to show later in the solution demonstration. We provide these documents as a working guide for when we work with our customers, because we've found that it really facilitates the conversation when we're trying to discuss flow and synchronization, integration, aggregation. Where is this data coming from? What is needed, and what are you looking to achieve from it? So as you can see how we've mapped out the software lifecycle architecture drawing here, you can see from the planning stage with CAPPM into the build, what happens when requirements are, and then the requirements are developed and tested, and what that looks like across the lifecycle. To level set the diagram, you'll notice that there are some dark orange arrows. Those dark orange arrows are representative of our synchronization capability. You'll also notice that within each of the toolset examples are yellow boxes with use case or requirement, defect. These are what we call an artifact. Ultimately, at the core of our synchronization, we are connecting an artifact from one solution to an artifact of another solution. And that, once we connect those two artifacts together, that's what Tasktop considers a mapping. So if you hear Maury and I talk about a artifact and or a mapping, that's what we're talking about in Tasktop speak. You'll also notice that there is a light orange arrow coming from the deploy category. These are common areas that are common tool sets that we've seen customers that are interested in deploying or integrating into other tool sets, other ALM tool sets, because there's event-driven information. There's a variety of tools out there. This, again, is just an example. And you'll also notice that we have the ability to aggregate the data from all of these tool sets so that we can provide better metrics around reporting, analytics, and traceability. And we'll be prepared to show this information, how this process in the solution demonstration. Maury, anything else you want to share before we move on?
Just to reemphasize that for Tasktop and for our partners and our customers, this really is a working document. And the conversations that we typically start with our customers, really, our customer comes to us looking at, I want synchronization between Jira and HPALM, right? Or between Blueprint and HPALM. It really starts out with, I have this very tactical need. And these lifecycle architecture diagrams really help the customer see that why they're trying to connect those two pieces is really because they're trying to get a bigger picture and a better understanding of the entire application lifecycle. So it's really fun to start with a picture with two what we call repositories, Jira and ALM, and then just start having the conversation about, well, what do you use for the PMO? Do you have a specific requirements management tool? Do you have a visual requirements management tool like iRise, for example? Do you have detailed agile tools like version 1 or Rally or CA's Agile Central, for example? So it really becomes this working document where, yes, we started with this synchronization between two pieces, but how can we help you solve the entire picture, right? And we have some light gray pieces over there on the left, and what we see is, there's some, I dare call mainframe legacy, right? The mainframe to me is mission critical. Same thing with a requirements management system like Doors, where if you want to send something to space, you want to send a person to space, you're probably using requirements management from Doors. And we see a lot of public sector and federal customers that are using Doors, and how do we integrate that into some of the newer practices like Agile, like Scrum, like SAFe, and Tasktop's able to include that as well as focus on quality from the customer point of view, right? From the public's point of view. How is my service? Are there incidents? Are there problems? How do I integrate all of that? So it's a really, really a living document. It's fun to create, and it becomes incredibly valuable, I think, for the customers and the partners that we work with.
Thank you, Maury. So while we just showed an example of lifecycle architecture drawing, I just want to circle back to the core of the Tasktop solution, and these are the connectors that we're synchronizing. So while we provided an example of a software lifecycle architecture drawing, this is a current list of our supported solutions, our supported connectors rather. So a couple things to notice: we support a variety of tools across the lifecycle, and we also support a number of versions that go way back. So what's important to note is that we really do want to make sure that we cover the application lifecycle and are able to support all of our customer needs. Before we get into the solution demonstration, I wanted to just share a little bit of information on Tasktop, who we are as a company, and where we've been and where we're going. So ultimately, at Tasktop, our goal is to connect the application lifecycle. We are a 9-year young company and have started in 2007 when our CEO and founder of Tasktop developed his thesis for the Mylan open source plugin. This is one of the most widely downloaded open source plugins that really facilitated the start of Tasktop and developer integration. Quickly, we've progressed through to system integration and defining software lifecycle integration across the lifecycle. As we've progressed in the space, in the integration space, we've found that it's very important and critical to pull the data from the solutions that we're integrating, because this data is so critical to understand how are we developing software, where are our bottlenecks, how long does it take for a defect to span the life cycle? How long does it take to resolve that defect? And now ultimately, with our ability to integrate an event-driven based information, we're now able to truly capture the entire DevOps life cycle and really integrate and connect that entire application life cycle. A couple of other key points that I want to make note is that we purely play in the integration space. You'll notice that we have 27 strategic partners and 43 vendor tools that we support. A number of the tool sets that were on the previous slide, they often compete with each other. The reason why we've been so successful and we have such a strong value proposition and relationship with the tools that we support and the solutions that we support is because we only stay in the integration space. We look to be that neutral partner and provide the connection, the integration across the life cycle. Another way that we've been so strong at connecting the application life cycle and a strong value proposition to Tasktop is something that we call our integration test factory. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner, we support over 303 versions that are tested and 500,000 API tests per day. Ultimately, what we are doing is we have a common specification that all of our integrations are built off of, and we test these integrations on a daily basis. So it's not just testing solution A to solution B, it's testing every single version of solution A to every single version of solution B, and so on and so forth. And what that does is it takes a lot of the maintenance off of the customer. Our job and our goal is to provide the integration, and we want to be the ones to provide that maintenance and make sure that if there's a new version, if there's something that needs to be adjusted with the connector, that we're the ones that find it first, that it doesn't affect your day-to-day integration, and that you can continue on with your first line of business. Before passing the baton over, Maury, anything else you wanted to say just on the company?
Yeah, I think that emphasis on the specification and these connections that we make to the end user repositories are really built over this almost 10 years of experience. So a lot of the conversations that we'll have with prospects and customers is really a build versus buy decision, and being able to really have the confidence to say, we've been doing this a long time, these are the things that we need to think about. And oh, by the way, that common specification that Laura talked about is 57 user epics with 10 user stories each, with more than 10 acceptance criteria each for each of the user stories, and having that all automated. It's not a small thing, right? Being able to quickly connect to a system via a web service call looks easy. It really is about the maintenance. It's really about the versions tested, the API tests run, so that you have a complete system. And we'll actually look at some of the specification as I go through the demo, as I use those as examples for my user story and my test.
Perfect. Thanks, Maury. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Maury. And Maury is going to be able to walk through the connected application lifecycle, very similar to what we showed in the lifecycle architecture drawing. A couple of key points as he's switching over. Maury is going to first show this from the user perspective. In an ideal world, a user won't know that Tasktop is running, and in fact, our best compliment is that you don't know that we're running. We are there and enabling the end user to stay in their tool of choice. He'll also be able to walk through, he'll show the user perspective, but then we'll also be able to show some of the configuration and the ease of use from a configuration standpoint. Any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. We want to make sure that we keep this interactive. So, Maury?
Thanks, Laura. And just confirm you can see the slide that is on my desktop. Okay. So as we go through the demo, we're going to use that application lifecycle diagram. We're actually going to break that down. I mentioned the typical conversation starting with two repositories and how those repositories work together, and then how we build this out. At Tasktop, we actually have things called integration patterns, these common patterns between the two systems that people initially want to talk about. And I'm going to show some of those integration patterns as we go through the demo. And like Laura said, we usually do this interactive. We're usually having lots of people ask questions, so feel free. I know we'll answer some of the questions at the end. But what I'm going to do is really start with this notion of these integration patterns. So if I take this bigger picture and I look at portfolio management and requirements management, so I've got a PMO, I'm creating tasks, which really in the PMO start out as capabilities, right? They start out as features, initiatives, these higher level portfolio components. And they need to feed into the application lifecycle, and they typically feed into requirements management tools. So as I look at Clarity, for example, I'm in my Tasktop connectors project. So we're going to simulate that we're building connectors, and we have our specification. So I've got a number of specifications here in Clarity, and as I create those specifications in Clarity, I really want to automate the creation of those in my requirements management tool. I'm trying to manage the systems as they go across, right? So as I come in and go into my requirements management tool, I want to make sure that after I've logged in, right, you get all of the information from Clarity into Blueprint. Now, this is the most important thing, because Laura mentioned that the requirements management people don't want to bounce between the development tool and the PMO tool and their requirements tool. They're really focused on what they do and need the information that they need to do their job. So as part of that synchronization process, we automatically created these use cases in Blueprint so that we can then start to hang requirements off and really progress down the application lifecycle. So we're going to take this, we can say the user can set up a connection to a repository, right? I'm going to come in my tool here. I'm going to create a new textual requirement. And let's go ahead and say the connector can communicate with the repository server given the necessary connection parameters. I'm using the tools, I'm setting the priorities, I'm publishing the data, right? We're going to come through, we're going to really, again, it's all about the power of the tools here. And Blueprint, for example, has a very strict control mechanism where I can make changes all I want, I can version things, but until I publish, they really don't become real. Again, I'm staying in my tool of choice here. I've got my connector can communicate with the repository, and everything between the PMO and the requirements management tool is now automated, and I can synchronize that data back and forth. So as we come into this picture, we're really aligning the PMO with the work that's being done, because the PMO at some point is going to want to say, well, how much does it cost? When am I going to get it? And what am I actually going to get, right? So that next step as we start to build this out is requirements management tools like Doors, like Blueprint, like the Agile tools, they still need work done, right? And we want to push that work out to the end users. So in this case, we're starting to incorporate Jira in this case, but this could be IBM's RTC, this could be Rally, this could be any number of the work-based tools. But what I want to be able to do is, as I create these requirements like I did in Blueprint, I want them to be able to show up in Jira and be able to work on them. So I created my requirement. If I come over, and I'm actually going to stay in Blueprint here. Right. So now that I'm in Blueprint here, I can actually see I have a Jira number associated with it. So even without going down the application lifecycle, Tasktop is synchronized and automatically created a user story in Jira and actually pushed back that Jira ID for me, so I could stay here and I can understand where I can communicate with that team via their Jira number, via the name. So as I come in and in Jira, right, I'm the work manager. Right, so I'm just going to refresh. Again, Tasktop automatically created the tools that I need. It's created the work item. And as we come through here, any of the changes that I make in the Jira ticket here, this user story, that's going to push back up, right? I want that validation. I want that verification. I want to be able to trace that all the way back. So as part of that process, you're really starting step by step, starting to include these individual groups within the application lifecycle. So because I've got these tasks now and I can assign them, how do I get even the change sets, even understanding the little changes that are made by developers, what changes were made in a specific release, what changes were made in a specific requirement, how much work did it actually take to be able to provide that feature, for example. So right now we're actually going to include the developer in that process. So as I come back, I'm going to go ahead and, as the development manager, I'm just going to go ahead and assign this to a developer, select OK there. It's going to save that. And as the developer, I can work in Jira, I can work in Blueprint, but typically what the developers are working in are the integrated development environments, the development studios, in this case, Eclipse. So when Laura talked about the foundation of our company being an Eclipse plugin called Mylan, that's actually what we're looking at right now, is that the Tasktop professional version of that, where within my development environment, I can have all the tasks that are assigned to me. So I'm just going to refresh and, oh, I got to work on this. Connector can communicate to the repository, again, automating all of this. And within the developer's user interface, I can actually open up that requirement, see all the details of it without leaving Eclipse, come back, and let's just go ahead and start working on it. So as that developer, I'm going to change the progress to start progress, and I'm going to go ahead and make some changes. So I'm going to actually work on a piece of code here. I'm going to make my change here. It's kind of a boring change. I'm going to change 2 to 3. But this is the key. This is where the teams that have to understand what's changed when and who changed it, this is really that deepest level, right? So that when I'm making code changes here and I save, I really want all of that incorporated back into my application lifecycle. So I come in, I'm going to check in this change into my source control system, right? And with Tasktop, I'm forcing kind of these checks internally so that I know I'm working on this specific requirement. So why not put the requirement in the commit message so that I can then trace that across the lifecycle. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I can continue to work. I can notify via email or talking in the hall that my developer, yeah, I started working on it. But really don't even have to do that. So part of that whole process is really integrating that integration piece of the story that Laura mentioned was, well, if I've got all this stuff integrated and synchronized, just to automatically update the progress in Jira, right? So now my status is in progress. Go ahead and attach a reference to the change set. So even in the actual requirement in Jira, I've got reference to that change set. Again, nobody knows that Tasktop's working here, right? We're just automating and communicating and synchronizing and integrating the metrics all the way through the lifecycle. And this really feeds all the way up to the requirements management tools as well. So as you start to refresh and start to understand where people are, from here, I don't have to dig into each development manager to see the status of my project or my program or the mission. Right? I can see who's assigned, what's the status, and how's that flowing through the life cycle. Right? And I was just about to say, are there any questions? But you guys can't talk right now. So at this point, it starts a conversation with our customers about how people work, the workflow that people use, why people want to start synchronizing. And this ability to synchronize and integrate and aggregate really enables just the entire betterment of the application lifecycle. You're reducing time between components, you're removing manual processes, you're automating components, and you're even automating the test portion of that as well, right? So as you might imagine, as I automatically create the artifacts in each of the systems, I want to start to include the testing components of those and include the automated testing components. So we're really, again, walking through the life cycle. So as we come through and we take a look at HPALM, and I refresh here, right, I've got my user stories as they come through. I can see the status of my events and really start to use and leverage the integration between the tools. So as I look through a requirement, for example, once it's in that testing tool, I can start to apply tests to it. So you can see test coverage here. I've applied my tests, but they haven't run yet. If I want to associate defects, I can create a new defect and associate that with my requirement, and tying in all of the individual components within the application lifecycle. So when I do that, I want all of that to be able to flow up through, again, the application lifecycle. So when I come back to Jira, for example, and I look at that specific requirement, I can see things like automatically created defects from my testing system, and that this is now blocked because the tests failed. I can see the status of the tests as they flow through, right? And all of this automatically flowing through the application lifecycle. And it's really important because we're tying all of these pieces together in a way that everybody in the application lifecycle is staying in the tool of choice, they're working the most effective way that they can, and everybody has the information they need through the lifecycle to do reporting or just basically to do the job. So long-winded end user view, right? There are a lot of users in here, and again, it typically starts with, I want to integrate the developer and the tester, or I want to integrate the PMO and the requirements tool. The goal here is to really get to this picture of continuous delivery, incorporating DevOps, the connected application lifecycle, so that as part of it, maybe I want build information in my traceability. I want to be able to see static code analysis from tools like SonarQube. Maybe I want to push automated testing results into ALM so I can, HPALM, so I can actually see the results of that. We saw the source code change, right? So Tasktop integrated the source code change straight from the developer's desktop right into that server-centric Jira ticket. And all of this providing this complete connected application lifecycle, and our customers are building this out today. They're having synchronization tie the individual use cases together. They're using the integration to pull in this event-driven system, the event-driven data, and the whole while they're storing that data as they go through, right? So as I come through kind of the nuts and bolts of it, I didn't have to worry about, well, make sure I'm recording what I need to record. If I look at the data tables, Tasktop has been recording every single change to the stories in each of the systems, to the defects, to the change sets, and providing that detailed level data, not just, oh, I see this new requirement. Record every change so I can see the velocity between the changes, how can I reduce cycle time, right? And for a lot of our customers, it's how can I give my management and my team prettier dashboards, right? So it's pulling together all this data and being able to say, not only is it the defect data and the user story data, but how do I start to incorporate the business side of it, or my partner side of it, right? So in my dashboard, I actually totally forgot that I had this, but I have a link into our Twitter feed. So I'm actually on my dashboard showing the blog of our latest release from yesterday, and that registration is still available for our webinar, and the fact that we're going to have a webinar, right? So here you're starting to include all of that lifecycle data into one. So a little bit on the technical side, how all that's done is, again, Tasktop is really focused on removing the complexity, spending our 10 years in developing these common specifications for the connectors, being able to connect to those connectors. So as you walk through the development of a mapping, for example, right? This is Tasktop Sync Studio. I'm really taking the complexities and I'm connecting to the repositories just like a normal user would, right? So over here down on the right-hand side, I've got my connection to Blueprint. I've got all of the use cases and the textual requirements there. But if I look at my Blueprint connection here, right, you saw some of the specifications here, but there are at least 10 user stories, and I mentioned more than 10 acceptance criteria for each, just to do this one connection, right? Whether it's HTTP, HTTPS, do I have to include a proxy server? Are there specifications? Is there validation? So we're really hiding all of this complexity, testing that complexity on a daily basis, and providing these connections to these systems in a very, very robust way. So that when you come in and set up your synchronization and your integration, you want to look at this and say, okay, on the Blueprint side, I have a name, that's the title, and on the Jira side, I have a summary, that's the title, and I want to make the synchronization go bi-directional, right? If I want to make it go from Blueprint to Jira and have Blueprint always own the title, I can do that. I can take at a field by field level and change how data is flowed back and forth. Because you'll end up with scenarios that I've got fields and attributes in Blueprint that just don't make sense in Jira. Or I've got these, for traceability on the Blueprint side, I want to enable that Blueprint requirement to actually have the Jira number and the HP number and the dev status and the assignee. And in order to do that, all I'm doing is say, oh, I want to add a new mapping. Let me select the field on one side, let me select the field on the other, and have those mapped together. Again, taking the complexity of those synchronizations and those mappings away. I think one of the simplest examples of that complexity is, how do I map priority in Jira to priority in HP ALM? And no two systems actually have the same set of nomenclature for their priority or for their severity. So in Jira, it's blocker, critical, major, minor, trivial. I've got to find some way to map that to the HP side. And what Tasktop does, again, removing the complexity, allows me not only to know that that's a drop-down that the end users are going to select, but Tasktop lets you know what are the acceptable values there. So it really just becomes an exercise of, okay, I want a blocker on the HP side to be urgent, or urgent on HP to be a blocker in Jira, all the way around, and just creating these mappings on the fly. And one of the things that our customers have really noticed is just even a simple integration, starting with an integration between Jira and HP ALM, or even Doors Next Gen and RTC, or Doors Next Gen and Jira, just getting the required fields and providing the automation around the creation of these artifacts, it's 80% of everything that they need in terms of this connected application lifecycle. And then they just get to focus on, well, what attributes do I need to flow back and forth so that I can actually understand what's going on? So again, taking that complexity of the synchronizations between the two components, allowing to focus on the true act of the synchronization, right? So that you can say, I'm really focused on requirement to user story, because when I create a new user story in Jira, that's the thing that my developers work on. So they need these fields to work, and I want to automatically create it in Jira. That's the conversation I want you to have, right? I don't want you to have, well, what kind of field type is it in Blueprint, and then how do I transform that because it's HTML on the ALM side, but it's a special HTML. Take that conversation away and really focus on the key components of this connected application lifecycle, and it's improved collaboration and communication. It's applying that synchronization, integration, and aggregation story to really solve this hard problem of time the application lifecycle together, getting better view into the validation and verification, and really tracing across the entire application lifecycle.